Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Duthie Aquatics. In this episode I'm going to be talking about Vallisneria, how to grow it and the growing conditions you need for it, as well as a few different varieties. So let's start with substrate. Vallisneria is a very easy plant to grow in terms of substrate. You don't need anything fancy. I'm growing Vallisneria in an inert substrate, so I've got coarse river sand in one tank with Vallisneria, as well as this just stock standard cheap as I could get river pebble. So these small pebbles have no nutritional value for the plant whatsoever, and the val does really well. So this is jungle or thin val, and it's literally just been divided up from stuff I've had growing outside. There's still a few snails that I've got to pick out of this tank to get it snail free, but hopefully they haven't laid any eggs yet. And as you can see, as I started planting, I did quite well. Got all the root systems planted in and they established quickly here. I got a bit lazier as I got over here, so how you plant it definitely affects how well it takes and grows, but you do not need to be pedantic about planting it. And if you're lazy or you run out of time, you get busy, you can leave it to float. It will kind of stunt and warp the growth if you do that, but it will survive floating for quite a while. Adrian's Fish Room has got some val that he's persistently got floating at the top of his tank with an air stone circulating water through it, and it's growing just fine. So you don't need to worry if you can't get it planted perfectly. It will just adapt to whatever conditions it's in. So you don't need an active substrate like aquasoil or a dirted aquarium to grow it. If you've got those things, it will go ballistic really quickly, but it will still grow crazy without any additives to the tank in terms of fertilizer or nutrients. So I think it's a very beginner friendly plant. It's probably got one of the lowest barriers to entry if you're trying to keep a plant that is actually planted in substrate and not something like a Java fern or a Nubius attached to a rock. Even for lighting, this is only a 1500 lumen light. There's two that you can see in shot here, but the one at the back there is actually for the tanks behind. This is just a single 1500 daisy chained shop light that's plugged into the ones over here. And it's growing val no problem, and you can see how emerald green the leaves are on the thin val growing under what would be classed as a low light. You can grow it under high light, you can grow it under medium light, and you can grow it under low light. You will need some form of light for it to grow, so if you're growing it in a better bowl and you've got it somewhere where it's not getting even light from a window, it's probably not going to do the best for you in those conditions. But as long as it's getting some form of light, even a desk lamp will do to grow this stuff, it will still just grow like a champion. So now that that's been covered, let's go and have a look at some of the varieties. I've shown you the thin val here, which is a really nice one to grow. There's another one if you want different sort of leaves. There's a few different varieties. This one here looks like corkscrew val. You can see the twisted leaves it's got, but it's actually a different variety that I find to be much easier to grow than corkscrew val. So this is Vallisneria contortionist. As you can see, I planted one mother plant here, and it's already started sending out rhizomes out from the main plant. So the way it propagates is it will either send runners above or beneath the substrate, and that's how the new pups will grow up through rhizome division. So you can see these ones here under a medium light. So there's two globes here. This is 3000 lumens. It's growing quite well, really lush green, and you can see the twisted parts of the leaves. You can see some parts of the leaves that are a lot less twisted. That's older growth from when I had it sitting in a much darker aquarium, which is actually the one just here, and it has no light whatsoever apart from what it was getting from the grow racks over there. So it still grew under those conditions. You just lose that really nice twisted effect to the leaves when you do that. So I find that corkscrew val tends to be a bit more temperamental and slower to grow than the Vallisneria contortionist, which is why I like contortionist a bit more than corkscrew val. So you don't need to worry about CO2 or anything like that. to get Vallisneria contortionis to grow really nicely for you. You'll notice that the leaves reach the surface like this and start to go across the water surface. That will be true for most Vallisneria species. If that annoys you, you don't like that look where you're trying to have the fish all at the top, or you're maintaining the aquarium, you don't like having your arm wrapped up in the thin valve or whatever type of valve leaves, pick a point. So say I want my valve to go from the substrate up to about halfway or just below halfway. I'd make a mental note there, or you can just put a little text line there. And anytime the valve grows taller than that, just come through with some scissors and give it the old snipperoo, and then clear out all that above leaves that have floated up to the surface. You can use it as mulch, or not mulch, as a fertilizer substitute in your garden, because it's all full of really good nutrients that breaks down really well. Or as you can give it to chooks. If you have chooks or ducks, they love to nibble on all the offcuts of your aquarium plants if you're going to get rid of them. But doing that, it will not hurt the valve. It'll just continue to keep growing, and you get a really nice look. If you were doing a single plant species aquascape, you could have the entire tank with valve, cut it at the halfway point, and you get to enjoy the best of having your fish at the top, as well as having really nice lush green plants at the bottom. And if you're using Vallisneria contortionis, it has a really nice effect having all those twisted leaves at the bottom, instead of trying to get something red that may be harder for especially beginners to grow. If you're also using Vallisneria for breeding, it's really good for breeding pretty much any fish you can think of, because if you're breeding and raising up the fry for, say, swordtails or guppies that may be predating on their fry, having a thick carpet of Vallisneria going through your tank, they will be able to hide in amongst the not the root systems, but the crowns of the plant, where it's a lot more tightly compact, and they won't be able to eat all the fry, so you'll get a really good survival rate from them in that way as well. So even if you're trying to raise up little rainbow fish fry, pseudomogul fry, doesn't matter, anything that's really small, having a tank full of Vallisneria and dumping the fry in there, you still usually get really good benefits, almost like you're using Java moss, because it grows so thick and dense. There's lots of places for paramecium and all the really micro organisms to hide and colonize for them to continually pick at. So you get a pretty good survival rate if you have no green water or any way to really feed your fry, if you've got a whole tank just full of Vallisneria growing quite densely. Another variety that I really like, so this variety is Vallisneria, or tiger val. So this Vallisneria actually came from Jason from Australian Biotopes. I bought it from him at the last auction I attended last year. And as you can see, under high light conditions, these ones are growing really nice tiger patterned leaves with almost a little bit of a copper or bronze hue to the new growth. This tiger patterning is really nice. If you're growing it under a lot less light, it will be a lot more similar looking to thin val. So you can see the old growth here has no tiger patterning at all, but all the new growth is really nice and lush and getting that nice stripy effect on it. So this has been planted now for about 8 weeks, and it has gone from a couple of clumps that looked half dead to starting to fill out the entire tank with a coarse river sand substrate and no nutrients added whatsoever. Vallisneria is also really good for shrimp, so you can see I've got quite a few shrimp in here, and there's more than a couple, if the camera will focus, little baby shrimp that are now floating around the tank, just enjoying life in with the Vallisneria. So if you enjoy the look of plants that pearl, having Vallisneria under high light conditions usually makes it pearl quite regularly. So this tiger val has been pearling in this tank pretty much since day dot after I got it planted in here. And you can tell that it's keeping the water clarity, the water chemistry really good, because the shrimp have been thriving, and I have dumped them in. I've given them no extra food or anything, and I haven't lost any shrimp, and they have been breeding. So you see bought would be a heavily underplanted tank for shrimp, and they're thriving in here just because Val is a really good plant to have in with them. And any of the plant leaves that sort of die like this, leaving them in for the shrimp, they will just kind of nibble that as it cultures all the microorganisms they like to eat. So that's another unsung hero for Val that I think will become a lot more popular as people become more familiar with the different varieties. There's another variety that I really like, which is giant Val. So this Val here looks like thin Val because it's only actually a small specimen. I brought that in from one of my IBCs outside. This is probably half the thickness in terms of like the leaf thickness that it will be when it is mature. And this is giant Val. So like the thin Val and the contortionist, it'll reach the surface and kind of cascade against the top, and I can just trim it as I need it to be. But the leaves will probably grow to be as thick as what you would see for spring onion or like chives or something like that. So it's quite a broad leaf. So as thick as what my finger would be in terms of broadness is how broad these leaves will grow as well. So if you have a larger tank, giant Val looks really good growing against the backdrop of a large aquarium. And if you have things like goldfish, giant Val does pretty well with goldfish. Thin Val does pretty well with them as well, but you need to get the plants established before you're putting in larger goldfish, because goldfish have a tendency to uproot around the bottom of the plants just by sucking up the pebbles and whatever. So if the root system is underdeveloped on the plants, they tend to eat the plants by uprooting them. Sorry, just freaking out the fish then, sorry. So it is compatible with quite a few different fish, but again, if you are going to have in with larger fish like Oscars, that will rearrange the tank. Unless you've got larger stones placed around the bases of your Vallisneria, or you have them in, say, a ceramic pot, similar to like a bonsai pot that I have right here, it can be difficult to keep them in with a larger fish. So you really do need to get the plants established before putting them in with the fish. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers Vallisneria. I think everyone should give it a go, or at least one of the varieties of it. So there are multiple varieties. There's probably way more than what I've just shown you here, because obviously I know that there's corkscrew Val, not just contortionist. So if you have had any varieties that I haven't mentioned in here, please leave a comment, because I'd love to find what other varieties there are and be able to actually try and source some to keep myself, because this is a plant that if you are breeding for profit, or if you're trying to grow plants or whatever to supply to a local store, take to your auctions or whatever, this is one that tends to be in really high demand. And if you're growing it under really nice conditions inside, you get all this really lush green growth instead of the stuff from a lot of wholesalers, which is grown outside, where it's really coppery bronze and usually covered in algae, a bit similar to like this part that's just here, but that's me trying to save the milfoil. So if you've got the really nice clean Vallisneria that's grown indoors under controlled environment settings, you get really nice growth. The root systems of them, instead of kind of being black or dirty like that, they end up being white, and they just present so nicely. You will not be able to keep them in stock if you've got really nice Vallisneria. So I really do recommend that everyone give it a go. I think I covered everything. If I haven't, please leave a comment below and ask whatever questions you want. If you do consider growing it with CO2 or fertilizer, just know it will go absolutely ballistic in your aquarium and likely take over. There is a phenomenon with some plants where they outcompete other nearby plants by sending signals that kind of stunt the growth or make the other plants stop growing. Vallisneria may do that. So if you are growing it in like an aquascape and you're finding that it's taking over, you'll just have to pull up those rhizomes from the plants that are getting too close to the ones that you're trying to preserve, because they can outcompete, especially by overshadowing other plants. So you do need to keep on top of trimming things if they're making too much of a shadow for your higher light plants. So they're not maintenance free, but if you don't want to do anything for your aquarium, just have a single species plant tank, they're a great one to go with. And actually, I'll show you. This is Vallisneria contortionis that I've been growing in a Daphnia tank in a plastic bonsai pot. So you can see how nice it looks just in really any condition. So that's it. Enjoy the video. Any questions, ask below.